When you hear the name Dipset, you think of three members, Cameron, Jewels, and Jim Jones, right? Wrong, bitch. What are you, a f***ing idiot? There's a fourth member who burst onto the scene seemingly out of nowhere, but unfortunately, he got the wind taken out of his sails just as quickly. And that's J.R. Ryder, the rapper, not the NBA player. What are you, a f***ing idiot? Let's not forget Freaky Zeke, Hell Rel, 40 Cal, and Max B as well. They're an important part of the story too. Now, for those of you who've never heard of him, or maybe you're too young to remember, JR made his debut in 2003 on Joel Santana's album called From Me to You. He was a feature on the track Squale, which is a term that I still yell out whenever I see cops. JR himself only released one studio album, so his commercial presence wasn't quite as significant as his fellow diplomats, but his underground presence was undeniable. He released 15 mixtapes from 2004 to 2018, and he absolutely dominated the hip-hop message boards at the time. Outside of the Dipset crew, he collaborated with Cassidy, Lloyd Banks, Paul Wall, and even Lil Wayne on one of my favorite songs of the era called Bird Call. So there's no doubt that he was getting to that level of the big three at Dipset. So how did he get there in the first place? Well, the lore is that his correctional officers would bring him house to house to battle different rappers across New York. He actually met Hell Rel in a studio before either of them were signed with Cam. Now, a little bit later than that, at one of his rap battles, he was introduced to Cameron by the same guy who introduced Cameron to Hell Rel, right around the same time Cam had signed his deal with Rockefeller Records. So it seemed as though the stars were aligning for J.R. Ryder at this time, but unbeknownst to him, there were underlying issues that were already boiling up to the surface. That brings me to what I like to call the BLT sandwich. Bitterness, loyalty, timing. BLT. Extra mayo. Pause. Bitterness. There was an unspoken agreement at Diplomat Records where Cameron would pick one guy who's up next, and all the focus would be put on that guy. Like, for example, this year we're pushing Jewels, or this year we're working on JR's project, whatever. And all the best beats would go to that rapper. According to JR, that would cause jealousy or bitterness across the group, even though nobody really spoke up about it. But there was some obvious animosity between him and 40 Cal because Cam essentially said, look, out with the old, in with the new. JR is the new kid in town, he's talented, and I'm betting the house on him. Loyalty. Loyalty, loyalty, loyalty. Earlier reports state that JR was signed to Diplomat Records in 2003, but JR clarified that he never actually signed with Cam. He was actually signed to the distributors. So the professional relationship was essentially based on trust and loyalty because there was no pen on paper binding JR with Cam. That worked against JR's favor when the group broke up and he had to become a solo artist. And at that time, Cam had moved to Orlando, so he was pretty much out of reach. Now, loyalty is a commendable trait and something that we should all strive for, and I would never put JR at fault for being loyal. But you gotta be loyal to yourself first, man. Make sure your own situation is right, and then you can situate yourself with others. Timing. Now, speaking of splitting up, unfortunately, JR joined right around the time the group was already starting to fracture. It finally all blew up in 2006 when the group went their separate ways due to disagreements between the members, particularly Cameron and Jim Jones. And there were also some claims of selfishness and other artists actually wanting to go solo. So that really put a stop to the momentum that JR had just started to gain in his career. Now, the crew would get back together and split up again, but eventually the album Diplomatic Ties was released in 2018. However, it didn't have JR or 40 Cal or Hell Rel on it. And that makes sense considering the fact that in 2014, JR recorded a freestyle dissing Cameron and Jim Jones over the phone in prison for World Star. Talk about biting the hand that feeds you, or fed you, I guess. That is what happened to J.R. Ryder, in my opinion. But he is still making music and doing interviews and staying active, so I do wish him all the best. And actually, he is a huge reason why I started writing lyrics back then. But now I'm much older and I'm making beats, so let's get into it. Okay, I have my sample pulled up and loaded in MPC Beats. It's called Thank Heaven for You by Pat Lundy. Let me play you a little snippet.
Thank heaven for you. I just wanna thank heaven for you.
Now, what Dipset would often do for their beats, and not just Dipset, but a lot of beats back in that era, is that they would tune the sample up. So that would pitch it up, and it would speed it up as well. And that's how you got that chipmunk sounding effect. So for example, if I pull tune down here to, let's say, 6.08,
Thank heaven for you.
Sounds familiar, right? However, I actually like the tempo of the sample that I chose. So instead of tuning it up, I'm actually just going to pitch it up. So I'm going to get that chipmunk vocal, but it's not going to be sped up. So I extracted that piece of the sample, I chopped it up. Took a long time, so I'm not going to show that entire process, but I am starting a new series soon where I'm going to be sampling from vinyl and going through the chopping process. But this is what it sounds like. When working with these more vintage samples from the 60s or 70s or whatever, the effects that you put on it are fairly important. The first thing I put is saturation. And what that's going to do is going to add some warmth to your sample and really add life to it. The second thing is compression, and that's going to tame the peaks, bring out the low end a little bit, and glue your chops together. The third thing is the air spring reverb, and again, that's going to glue everything together and make your chops sound more cohesive. And then last, but definitely not least, the EQ. I cut out the low end, ducked down a little bit of the highs, and there was a sound at this frequency that I didn't like. It was like a snare or a tambourine or something. So I killed it. I dipped it all the way down, almost all the way down. So now with my chops laid down, let me show you what it sounds like before the effects and after the effects. Now for the drums. If you're used to sampling and making boom bap samples with beats, you're probably used to making a two-step hi-hat. That's not what Dipset did. Dipset used a faster hi-hat with rolls integrated as well, so that's what I did here. Also, since my sample is just a little bit repetitive, I have to be a little bit more creative with the drums. So for the first 4 bars, I have, I guess what you can call a typical trap pattern, if you notice here. But then for the 5th to 8th bars, I switch it up and I do like a 3-hit with no snare. Okay, it's missing a lot of low end, so let me go for my bass right now. That sounds so much better, and I basically followed the pattern, the same pattern in this sample. Now this is a Dipset beat, so you know we gotta put in that tom roll. So create a new piano roll and load it in just a basic tom one shot. And I did what I thought sounded good. Now, if you listen to a lot of the beats back then, especially the Dipset beat, the instrumentals do sound kind of repetitive, but in a good way. However, I'm a producer in 2025 and I make beats for you guys to listen to, so I need to keep it a little bit more interesting. I did switch up the drums, but I feel like it's not enough, so I'm going to add in a bridge section with a piano and a string. So I pulled up the felt piano in Sign Player because it has a little bit more of a vintage sound to it, like a softer sound. And I'm just going to stick to this basic pattern. Reverb, Cymatics origin. For the string, I'm using the old factory preset from Monster Strings because it has kind of like that, I don't want to say vintage, more like cheesy synth string sound to it that was popular back in the early 90s. The pattern is similar to the bass with a little bit of a switch up. Spent about half hour, 45 minutes mixing and arranging it and stuff. Made a few tweaks here and there, but let's listen to the final product together. Why not?
This is French cooking.
See, just listening to God damn it, listening to it like this without any vocals or acapellas or whatever, it it does get repetitive. So that's why I bring in this bridge at around this point to switch it up. See, right there it says bridge. In the background, I still have the sample going, but I filtered it.